Chompin Puck on WoodwardSports.com. Detroit's hockey show. Featuring four-time Stanley Cup champion Darren McCarty and Michael Gentry. Chompin Puck is the voice of the Detroit hockey community, where we bring together the pros and the fans to chomp some puck. Welcome to the show.
Well, here we go, guys. Like I said, something special today. Darren McCarty, four-time Stanley Cup champion here. And as you can see, grind time. If anybody doesn't know, obviously I have my own podcast that I've had for a long time that I used to do, Grind Time with Darren McCarty. You can probably check it in the ether. But I told you when we started Chompin Puck that it was the hockey version. Well, the interview is a big part. And as you can see, this is a very special interview. So I put on the Grind Time sweatshirt. These are going to be called the Chompin Puck Chronicles now. This will be the first one ever, and I couldn't think of a better guest. I mean, you just have to track this kid down because he's flying all across the country now and again, but it's the first time ever recorded that the McCarty boys are going to sit down together. Who do I mean? The one and only heir to the throne of the McCarty legacy, Mr. Griffin James Robert McCarty. Griffin, how are you, bud?
Better now.
Better now. Now, I think it's important. What I want to bring back is because we've never really sat down and some of the questions that I want. And obviously being the son of Darren McCarty, which isn't easy, but this isn't that show. This is the hockey show. So, what I want people to know is where Griffin started. So Griffin was born May 20th, 1996. I believe off the top of my head between games 2 and 3 of the Western Conference Finals between the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. Why does that come to mind? Because this was games between games 2 and 3 where eventually game 6, Chris Draper would get hit from behind in the infamous Claude Lemieux. Don't apologize anyways. You can go find that everywhere, right? We're not talking about that. So Griffin was born Sinai Hospital, which is no longer around. And now he is the head coach. He'll be 27 years old this year. He's 2 years now. You've been the head coach of the UCLA Men's Hockey Club, yep. Right? So that's a long area sort of to cover. What I want you to do, though, is tell everybody maybe just a little bit of the history, just about your hockey and then your sort of love of hockey and relate to people in the Michigan and the Detroit area, some of the teams that you played on and some of the guys like that. So I want to take the first part of this episode just to sort of go back and talk about how hockey sort of the Griffin McCarty hockey experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot to it. I mean, you can go different avenues from growing up, and probably the first time ever lacing on skates would be at Joe Louis, running around there like it was my second home. And
do you remember your first time on skates?
I don't remember my first time on skates, but I can remember vividly being in the rink when you guys are practicing.
How old?
I want to say probably around the O2 Cup, so probably 8, 10.
The O2 Cup, Matt Griffin's is worse at math than his father. He would have been 6, yeah. Right? So if we're going to go to the O2 Cup's important because, and I'll get Michael to pull up the picture, but that's where you were on my shoulders.
Yep.
At 6 years old. So your first memories were, so say around 2000, 2001, 2002. Is that fair?
Yeah, we'll
4,
say
5, 6.
Yeah. Pre-lockout before you went to Calgary, but
so yeah, and it's important because you did learn how to skate at a young age because you do not skate like your father. You do not run on the ice. That was actually one of the
it's not much
attributes.
Better, but it's definitely
so
better.
You think it's because you were privy to Joe Louis Arena ice?
Yeah, the hard ice. Yeah, we'll
That's
we'll
what
get
it
into
is.
that. Yeah,
Shout out to Al Sabaka. All right, so 4, 5, 6. Remember skating right at Joe Louis Arena. And it's funny because I know we segue off this, but I always tell the story about you and Scotty Bowman. I think you were like 4 years old and watching the game and being grandpa, stuff like this. So this is sort of brings me back to memories of those times. When if people seen the Slapstick Comedy Tour and me tell a story about Scotty slamming the door on Barry Smith's face because he had somebody in there that knew fucking hockey, and it was you at 4 years old. So back to those days. So then how about organized hockey? Like, how did you get involved?
I mean, played for Little Caesars for a bit growing up. And then when you went to Calgary, I played for the local Birmingham Rangers, which was a, extremely fun experience. Great group of guys. Some guys that I'm still friends with to this day. So
give them some shout outs.
Tommy Apap.
Tommy Apap, former captain of the Michigan State Spartans. My Brian Trache, just one of the hardest working kids ever. The motor never stops. He will pass out before he quits.
Yeah,
fair enough.
He'd probably regain consciousness and still be working. He wouldn't even know.
He wouldn't even know. That is so true. Tommy Apap, that is so true. Who else playing?
I mean, one of my other really good buddies, Brian Hubbard, that I played with at Caesars and then played with him later on after the Rangers for Orchard Lake Pirates and then at U of D Jesuit where we played high school. So he's another guy probably that would work so hard. He would work so hard, he'd go through the boards and then go through the boards on the other side to come back.
Yeah, but he would be concussed, right, and not know it. Hubs, too. Between Tommy and Hubs, those guys coaching you kids growing up, two of the hardest working guys. And it's true. You guys are still good friends sort of to this day. So I guess my question to you is, it's important. I think one of the things that growing up, and I always instilled in Griffin, was just because I have 4 Stanley Cups or 2 at the time, 3 at whatever it was, is that my love of hockey and your love of hockey, there's no greater. It's just different, right? Obviously for me, the physical part of the game and being that team guy, what was it that drew you to the love of hockey?
I don't know. That's a great question. I've really never thought of it that in depthly, but it's one of those things where I feel like, hockey is very much, I would say who I am, not in the sense of like being like a hockey player, but just being in the sense of like, something that I really, take a lot of pride in, something I'm very interested in, something that, I mean, still to this day, and, my girlfriend and my friends will tell you, being in LA, the early games start at 4 p.m. So if I could sit there and watch games from 4 p.m. When the East Coast games start till the end of the West Coast games around 9:30, I would easily do it every day. And it's just one of those things where it's just, the natural love of the game and loving everything about it, the ins and outs, the little things, I mean, even to this day, seeing a game live and there's something about, seeing a guy get a puck off the wall, is really nice. Or seeing a guy block a big shot. Maybe something little ins and outs like that the casual fan, they want to see the hits and the goals. I want to see the little things. I want to see, maybe a guy takes a hit, who's the guy that's going to go and, initiate the fight, or goalie makes a big save. Who's the guy that's going to go and give him the first tap on the pad, stuff like that. So I feel like, I grew up around the game. So I, even if I didn't want to love it, I never stood a chance, but lucky enough, I probably loved it even more than I was needed to.
I think that's important, and not to take it out of context and get too far ahead. But to me, when you told me a few years ago that you were going to become the head coach for the UCLA hockey team, I couldn't have been more prouder for you. But to me, it was, I've always say, don't have to tell me right or wrong, tell me the why. Is the fact that explained everything. You growing up, because Griffin was the one, and it might be you might be the person out there or have the kid that does that he was always building hockey rinks. He was always playing with hockey guys. He was always has hockey scenarios. It was always hockey, and it wasn't as much as when I was growing up destroying things and shooting pucks at things and tying my sister to the net and using her as a goalie and stuff like this. Of scoring the physical goal, you like the intricacies and everything that went behind that. Do you see it that way? Is that because it takes us to love the game in the way that you do? You see it in a different eye. Do you think it's because, like your coaching style now, does it have to do with sort of growing up, or does everything play into that, where it's sort of your path?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's, obviously something, even now I'm 27 years old, but I still think back to, growing up around those Red Wings teams and all that stuff and in the locker room and in Grand Rapids and all those great experiences. But I do think that, the way that maybe I see hockey or, coach now is, a lot of that stuff because, my experiences were different. It's not just, the stuff that's going on the ice. It's, the locker room. It's the ins and outs. It's the, there's a lot more that goes into not just coaching, but playing than what's on the ice. That's maybe 50% of the battle. Maybe. 50 might even be generous. There's a lot more that kind of goes into it. And that's, like you mentioned, I feel like that's the thing where my love of the game from a young age was like, maybe more of the like creative side, building rinks with blocks or drawing team uniforms with like markers and stuff, just because I loved that aspect of it. And that comes through, I think one of the things too, like even playing, I didn't want to, I didn't want to like have to be Darren McCarty's son and go out there and be as much as a fighter or a bruiser. I wanted to, forge my own path. But at the same time, too, that's not like I'm going to, be resentful or be like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. It's just like, maybe I saw the game differently, as you mentioned.
But I think that you were a different player also, right? I think that the thing that really people understood or you made them realize because it was your play, because like you were a big, strong skater. If anybody who hadn't seen Griffin play, he's that he could play forward, he could play defense. He's very versatile, but he's got a huge shot. But
not great aim.
No, the coordinates is off, but it's got a lot of juice on it, and the creativity, and as far as like that power forward mentality, was there like for me, it's always noted that like I was gonna be Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet was my guy, with the splash of this and that, but it was Rick Tocchet, score, lead, fight. That was my guy. Who was your guys when you were growing up that maybe that you were looking to be? Because you had aspirations to play in the NHL, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And we'll get to your story, but how about growing up? Do you have your favorite guys?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, don't want to pump your tires too much, but obviously you were up there, but that's from birth. That was assigned.
Well, you were like, you know what? I like you said earlier, I got a Griffin tattooed on me to prove that you're my favorite. As out of your mouth, I didn't say that, ladies. You're up here.
Son.
You're my favorite son. There you go. My favorite biological son.
Yes, exactly.
Shout out to Brennan.
But no, like Jerome McGinley was always a guy that I looked up to and loved. It was great. Obviously, getting to meet him in person in Calgary. Honestly, I don't like if you said you can be one player, Johan Franzen. If I could have been Johan Franzen, that'd have been the best thing ever. This big goal scorer who didn't have to be physical.
No, you would have been Johan Franzen, right? And then when it was time to bite back and stick up for yourself or show a little bit of mean, and I don't care. It's and you know what? You have that's a great sort of segue because you did play, Birmingham, Orchard Lake, the Grizzlies, but then you went to UAD and you made the UAD varsity team as a freshman, right? And I always say to everybody out there, the greatest thing, if anybody says what's the greatest parental thing or whatever you did, and I give Griffin's mom all the credit also too, but to what the UAD Jesuits did for you was the thing that I knew that you needed the most because I didn't get it. And it was structure and it was study habits. And I remember you poor kids in 9th and 10th grade, the homework and the hardest part. And let me ask you this, because I remember telling you that when you get through 9th and 10th grade here with realizing what your study load with what everything else was and stuff like this, I said, the rest of your life's going to sort of be a lot easier. Was 9th and 10th grade Jesuit, as you look back, the hardest but most fulfilling?
Yeah, no, 100%. It was a
shout out Jesuits.
Yeah, it was a it was one of those things where I was only there for 2 years. But it was, like you said, it was 2 years that really shaped. If I didn't go through the 2 years at U of D and, getting my butt kicked up and down the classroom academically, not just, grades were fine, but like the workload and kind of, as you mentioned, like, the accountability, the time management, just little things like that kind of, I somehow got into UCLA, transferred there, and graduated. Like I would, never would have happened if I never experienced the U of D experience.
Right, which is a little bit ahead, but like to fast forward, because after that, you went and played junior hockey. You went to try to fulfill your dreams. You played up in Canada and played for the Wellington Dukes and stuff like this, but you ran into concussion problems, correct? Which eventually sidelined you and has sidelined a lot of other people. But the one thing that I'm most proud of you for is that you didn't let that kill your dream of being involved in hockey, right? So with that Jesuit education, to everybody, you did. What did you went and did, and you went and did what you needed to do. You embraced the suck, right? You went to community college
For 2 years. Yeah.
for 2 years to get your grades up. How much out of hockey were you before you went back to UCLA? So between the concussion and stuff like this, how much hockey did you? Because talk a little bit about, maybe your mindset, thinking back to never, to have your dream sort of crushed in the reality of it, but changing it, but also too, I know you love to play, so being away from the game, is there anything that you can look back now and that you've taken from it, or you had to have taken it at the time, because to be able to stick to a game plan and fulfill, your dream, like I guess that's the inspiring part. Sometimes if you have to have goals, you have to have dreams, but sometimes you can't just get there. It's going to be sidetracked, and that's part of the journey, and that's sort of what had to go in it. So like how long were you off the ice, and what was that like for you to have to switch gears?
I mean, it was, culture shock, not just moving, as you mentioned, I did my 3 years in Canada playing junior, and it was one of those things where you go there at first and you're like, okay, this is a stepping stone. I want to play pro. I want to play as high as I can, get injured very, quickly into it, and things kind of change, and, it goes through, you're obviously enjoying it and you're playing towards something bigger, but you're kind of like, as it's going on, you're kind of hitting this realization that, those dreams that you set out to since you were 4 years old aren't going to happen. But at the same time too, so you're going through that kind of side. But it's also one of those things where it's just like, that wasn't my path. It wasn't meant to be. But at the same time too, so then I go and, finish juniors, move out to Los Angeles to be with my mom and my sisters. And, it's going to school. I mean, I did my senior year of high school in Canada while I was playing junior, but, I wasn't really doing much school.
Yeah.
So, then I'm out, I'm off for 2 years playing junior. And so now you get to this point where, you're going to, I'm going to community college, something I've never thought I would have to do. I was a very middle of the pack student in high school and growing up. And then it gets to this thing where it's like, okay, go to community college. I'm driving from Manhattan Beach to Santa Monica. It's 45 minutes there. It's 45 minutes back, depending on traffic. And it's complete culture shock. I grew up my whole life. My whole life was revolved around playing hockey. Either if it was minor hockey to high school hockey to junior, where, that's all you're doing. And even like growing up playing hockey, like all I could think about growing up going to school, all I could think about was hockey. It wasn't like, oh, I have a test tomorrow. It's like, oh, I have a game. I have this test that's in the middle of it, but I don't really care that much because I have a game that night. So now you have to shift your mentality to being like, okay, it wasn't even just like, I have to get good grades so I can transfer to a good school. It was like, you don't have that thing to look back on. So now school's kind of it. So
no safety net.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's like, which at the same time too, I think, from my experience with hockey and growing up around it, I was able to kind of use that work ethic or that kind of like extra, motivation or whatnot to put into my schoolwork. Which, lucky enough, I was successful for my 2 years and, was able to transfer to UCLA. And
So talk about that.
Yeah. Well,
Talk about, right? So the decision, right? You got your grades, you embraced the suck, you did what you needed to do, and then what was in your decision? Because so people know is that the one thing was to go to UCLA so that you could play again specifically.
I mean,
Was that your goal in mind when you started going back to, or was there another goal, or when did UCLA come into your sights?
So being out there and like having like club hockey and stuff, that was always something that I wanted to do. I was playing like, men's league, but I was away from like competitive hockey, something that I grew up around. So then it's like, okay, when I transfer, I'll have the opportunity to play club hockey. And, especially for myself, it was like, playing hockey is great. But the one thing that I was really missing that I was looking forward to is like going to a school and, regardless of what the level was or whatever, it was just meeting friends or guys, to be a part of a hockey team again. Guys that had similar interests. Because it's one thing too, I was moving, I'm moving not only cross country, but I'm moving to a place where like hockey's not. It's definitely like it's big in niche markets, but it's not like something where you grew up in Michigan, you're in Canada, where it's like hockey. You can go across the street, hold up a sign, like give me a high five. You play hockey, and your hands red by the end of it.
Right.
Give me high fives. Do that in LA, and people are gonna ask you what hooky is.
Yeah.
But no, and it's just like so. That was like my main goal was just to go to a school and. Obviously I wanted to, I was transferring. I wasn't going to put in all that work at community college to not go to a good school, but have that opportunity to play hockey and kind of, maybe like, relive the glory days for 2 years and just have a fun time, enjoying playing the game. And I think
Carty's like comebacks, kid.
Yeah, no kidding. I didn't stand a chance. But also too, it was just nice because then I'm going to a situation where, I can kind of be the stud star player. I can be a goal scorer. I can kind of do all that stuff. So that was fun. But the main aspect was just being, around the game again and, being in the locker room and, having a group of brothers and, that you're kind of, fighting with and going to war. And one thing I'll never forget, I got a text from my grandma when I got into UCLA. And it said, something along the lines of like if we thought you were going to be a Bruin, it would be a Boston Bruin, not a UCLA Bruin. So that's not talking about how my love of hockey and my not love for school. Yeah. But no, I mean going to UCLA was the greatest thing that ever happened, and it wasn't easy. It was a very hard path. Those 2 years at community college and not being around hockey. But I wouldn't change it for the world because those 2 years of being involved in playing and, our team wasn't good and, the level was a lot lower than what I just came from playing in juniors in Canada. But, that didn't really matter because, I got the group of friends that I wanted to and, privileged enough, obviously, to what we're doing with now and, transforming that program into, we're trying to make it, a top program in the West and, aspirations of hopefully taking the program to E1 one day. But, that would never have happened if it wasn't for, not, what I had to go through either with the school or the hockey dreams kind of coming to an end.
So at the end of the day, when you graduate from UCLA with what degree?
Communications and a minor of history.
Nice. Proud of you. Yeah. And so so you graduate, when did the opportunity to coach come up?
So it kind of came up my senior year. It was kind of something that was like, would you want to come back and, help with the team? And that was something too, where I've always, I want to stay involved in hockey and especially, if I can stay in, Los Angeles and still be involved in hockey, it's kind of best of both worlds for myself. And so then, COVID happened and shut down the season for the next year. But it was like probably the spring, summertime, I was approached again by the team and just asked, do you want to coach? And I jumped on it and was like, yeah, I want to get back involved. And, the next year we had the best year in program history. Went the furthest we've ever gone. We were one goal away from going to nationals, which would have been the first time for the program, lost in regional finals. And, this year again, a great season, lost in regional semis and, we're starting to put the pieces together, but, it's been a lot of fun. It's been hard work, and I definitely understand why coaches go gray so early. But no, it's just great to be involved in the game, and especially for a program that not only did I play for, but take a lot of pride in.
So, is your aspirations to continue to coach at the higher levels to get to be an NHL coach, or is it? I know you like that video stuff and you like to watch games and stuff like that, or do you see yourself more as in the I guess more of an assistant GM sort of thing, or a GM sort of thing where you're more in charge of the building the team?
Yeah, I think I would definitely. I enjoy coaching, but in perfect world, I think I'd want to be more management side.
Okay.
Be more, watching the games higher up and kind of seeing those little things and kind of, not maybe the ins and outs as much, but like you said, putting teams together, finding players to be a part of teams, just stuff like that. I think, that is definitely something where I feel like it's my process has shifted from, wanting to play in the NHL to now, I want to work in the NHL,
Okay.
I want to work for an NHL team, and I've done it before. I was in community college, worked my way up to UCLA. If that's the path that I have to do, scouting or whatever, I've done it before. I'll do it again.
Well, you're a McCarty, and you aren't afraid to put the work in. Stuff like that. We're going to take a break here, quick, a little bit behind the scenes. When we come back, we're going to ask, not only have the Ask DMAC section that we always do of Chompin Puck, but I'm going to ask Griffin some questions about growing up around the Red Wing locker room that you might hear. But first, let's hear from our friends, the heavyweights. Yeah, you got to love those big boys. All right, we're back here, Chompin Puck. Yes, the Chompin Puck Chronicles first edition, the McCarty boys, Darren and Griffin McCarty. Here, first section, we just went a little history, how you went from Sinai Hospital in downtown Detroit, Michigan, to UCLA behind the bench. Quick question on that. With the stuff that we hear around here with the Big Ten and the Pac-10 and stuff like this and football and stuff like this, is that something that the hockey team can get swept up in, and maybe is that a good thing for your program?
Yeah, I think the Big Ten definitely would be, thinking about it on a bigger picture. It definitely would be the right step in the direction to eventually get D1 hockey at UCLA, just because now you have a conference that has hockey established. So, unlike, obviously like Arizona has a D1 team, but, they don't have a conference to play in. So, like, at least there's that motivation where it's like if they do come in, there is a conference in that side. So, I definitely, yeah. And I think, too, with Arizona State, and especially this year, being so successful in building the new rink and, how great it is, that there's definitely rumblings and there's a lot of questions. I don't think it's anytime soon, unless, anyone with a big pocketbook wants to help change that. I don't think it's anything soon, but, that's what we're trying to do right now is build a program and kind of prove that, not only college hockey can work on the West Coast, but it can work with UCLA students. UCLA students, people that are, going to UCLA can still be very successful with hockey. And, you build that and kind of lay the blueprint, everything else will fall in place.
Yeah, that's what when we talk. The hardest thing is you don't realize, but it's tough to get into UCLA as far as grades wise. So your selection to not only that and players to go out west, it's not really the big market or anything like that. So, I mean, you have the right attitude. The time will tell. Just got to put the work in. But it's hopefully sooner than later if you're a part of that. So I want to take this time because there's like a whole bunch of questions that I don't think, maybe we've talked about or maybe we haven't or your dad's forgot or things like that. But pretty much, I think a lot of people out there want to know what it's like to grow up, around Joe Louis Arena, as you mentioned like that. I guess I'm gonna name some guys. And then you tell me either relationship or impression or maybe a story or something like that. because what you'll hear out of my mouth is the fact that, that I'm grateful for. And a lot of us, older, myself, Drapes, Marty LaPointe, that we had our kids when we were younger. And the best thing about whether I was in Detroit, whether it was in Grand Rapids, it didn't matter. It was family first. And, we could do a whole show about Grand Rapids and all the fun that we had there. But, let's start out with first I want, what is your best or a few memories of Joe Louis Arena? Did you have some that stick in your mind?
I mean, I don't even know where to start. I'd say one of the coolest things that even I look back to today, like being, a little kid, I'd go out on the ice before, you guys in the Wings would go out for practice. And then when they're on the ice, I'd go and, hang around in the locker room like it was my house. Or one of my favorite things I would do is, I'd go up and, walk around the concourse, just myself, as, little kid walking around the concourse in Joe Louis. Just there's no one there. You think of that place during game days, you can't even walk through. It's like sardines. But I would just walk around and it'd just be quiet, but it would just be cool knowing, not only a history, but just, how it was on games. Or, I'd walk in the stands and I'd sit in, all these different sections and just see how the rink looked from there. So there was a lot of little things like that, a lot of just kind of, self-exploring, going around the rink, checking it out. I mean, also, the fact that I would just go and sit in the lounge and just eat Little Caesars pizza until I passed out was pretty great too. And then, I'd go and, I'd be sitting on the bench and there'd be, Steve Yzerman, Pavel Datsyuk, Nick Lindstrom, Chris Draper, Dominic Hasek, legends of the game of hockey. And I'm just sitting there, just innocent, thinking nothing of it, just watching you guys practice, or going out on the ice after practice is over and guys are still on the ice and I'm shooting on Jimmy Howard, or, I'm getting into fights with who knows who I can get under the skin of that day. Or, in Calgary, I remember I was just starting to play defense and Deanne Phaneuf was nice enough to give me a couple, pointers. So there's definitely stuff like that where I was very appreciative in the moment of doing it because I knew how special it was. But even looking back and just, the few memories that I can kind of remember vividly, how special they were.
Let's start Scotty Bowman. What do you remember? What are some of your memories about Scotty Bowman?
I mean, I do very, I faintly remember the story that you tell about, stumbling and kind of into his office and just sitting there watching a Saturday afternoon. I think it was Bruins Blues.
It was. I remember that for whatever
But
reason.
I just remember just sitting in there, and that's the thing too. You're this little kid, and you don't realize you're in not only just in a room with maybe the greatest mind in hockey history, but just sitting there and just kind of watching, and
what age does it hit you that like telling us like now you're a coach, a hockey coach and whatever like this, and like when you're like 4 years old, you know what I mean, and it wasn't just one time. I mean, Scotty would be like grandpa, but did it ever like just because certain things with me, I'll be like, damn man, I did that, and I sort of forget. Does it hit you like that now that you're coaching even more? That it's so surreal?
I think a lot of it, when I moved away from Michigan was kind of where it started to slowly hit me, and all of like the cool experiences that I was able to, enjoy or partake in. I remember I saw Scotty at when I came in for the 25 years of the Cups this November. And that was something too, where I was like, "Oh my God, it's Scotty Bowman!" And it's like, when I'm 5-6 years old, I'm just walking into his office like it's like I'm walking to like my bedroom or something. Like it's so casual, and I'm just sitting in there. Like that's something where it's like if I could do that like now, go and pick his brain and kind of like relate that into what I'm doing. But just the fact that I can remember like it being in the Wings locker room. At the Joe in the old like workout room and having like the hurdle things where like we'd use them as soccer nets, and I'd have Pavel Datsyuk kicking the soccer ball around And it's just like little things like that just like, looking back, you're like, oh my God, like, just memories and stuff like that. When you're little, you don't realize how special it is. And looking back today, I'm just like, holy crap. Like, yeah, it's truly incredible.
that brings it up is I guess maybe the question of bringing up memories of different guys, but like trying to bring people to behind the scenes of the locker room is that, like, even to this day, is what I'm grateful for, is that the relationships that you've built from a young age with my teammates has nothing to do with my relationship with my teammates, right? Yeah. And I think of Drapes, I think of Jason Woolley, obviously Maltz and Ozzy and Dandy, Aaron Ward, Marty Lapointe. Maybe do you have any stories about, like, who would you gravitate to, or who would gravitate towards you? Was there one that would end up, you'd end up, maybe on the ice playing catch with the puck with, or maybe would, start a shinny hockey game with the guys in the room or something like that? Was there, more to things like you remember with that, of being around?
One that really sticks out to me, and this was when I was older, was Jimmy Howard in being in Grand Rapids. And that was like a big brother, little brother relationship. That was like, countless amount of times I can remember us literally like wrestling in the locker room, like in the middle of the locker room just after practice. Or we got into a wrestling match at the Stanley Cup after party after we won the cup in Game 6. We were at the plane hangar, and me and Howie were in the corner wrestling each other and just stuff like that. And I remember too, like, I could literally talk about Grand Rapids and that experience for hours, because it was just, I honestly think I enjoyed Grand Rapids more than you enjoyed it.
I don't know. I don't know, dude. I had a lot of fun there. Yeah. Old Graybush had a lot of fun being the old guy there, and being able to bring you on road trips and stuff like that. But so you mentioned Jimmy Howard, and that's sort of like the, on the comeback, but being able to appreciate it more, and the way that, whether it was Stutzy or Mike Stuthers or Kurt Fraser or whatever, and Dog sitting next to you right now as we're recording this, is the fact that, you were always a part of it on the ice, and the guys made it a part of it too. How does, I guess maybe the question is, how does that, your relationship with Drapes and Woolley and those guys, how does it play forward to this day? Because you still talk to these guys, like as far as, like, guys are invested in each other's life. Like Jason Woolley was your hockey coach for some time and stuff like this, but just maybe talk about how the locker room's no longer there, but still the relationships are.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, like, especially with Drapes, he's one person that I've, reached out to a bunch of times for, a lot of different aspects of hockey, either if it's advice, or if it's help with stuff, whatever. He's always been one of those guys where it's like, I may not speak to him for a year, but I know that I can reach out to him and I'll always be there. So there's relationships like that. Wolves too, like when I was, after I played my 2 years at UD, I played AAA and for the Grizzlies, and that was another thing too, where I got the opportunity from him. I went to the Czech Republic to play in a kind of like a showcase thing, and that was like one of the coolest things I ever did, and that was because Wolves kind of brought me on board, and I feel like that's one thing too where kind of like the family aspect that you talk about, and one of those things where I feel like when I came back for the 25-year anniversary, there's a lot of guys I haven't seen forever. And it was just nice to kind of not only just like have the conversations, not, because before I was a kid, now I'm an adult, so I can kind of, talk to these guys. But it's just cool, remembering too, of the fun times you had, or, just the fact that, there's these legends or the game that you kind of like know you on a personal level. It's kind of that, you kind of forget, oh, wow, what a privilege, and what a, how grateful I am that I did have that opportunity to kind of grow up around, one of the greatest stretches of an organization in professional sports history.
Amen to that. And, speaking about that, What is your? Do you have a? I want to ask you. It's a two-part question. What's your favorite, like Stanley Cup memory moment? What's your favorite parade moment? If you remember at the different parades, right? And like, what did the Stanley Cup like? The first one I got to think that you remember vividly is '02. Right, when you're on my shoulders and all that different stuff. And then I remember when we won in '08, you and your sister Emerson were there, and you were too big then. And I said, you're too big to get up on my shoulders now, bro. You break me. Yeah. So, but we had both of those, experiences on the ice. But talk about it from a kid's perspective, and a kid that'd been around and watched, the dad and his buddies and stuff like this being a part of it.
Yeah, '02 was special because I was still young, but obviously like winning in Detroit too. And you look back at the '02 year, and as we did the math earlier, I was 6 years old, not 8 or 10. I think I got the same math skills as my aunt.
Yeah, you absolutely do.
But
shout out to Aunt Mel.
But yeah, that was
Dummy.
cool, especially being in Detroit. So you win the cup in Detroit, and I remember like being in the tunnel with the families waiting to go on the ice. Obviously being on your shoulders, it's very biased saying this, but one of the best sports photos.
Oh, absolutely.
Championship photos. Whenever like the NHL or ESPN or TNT does those commercials, I'm always waiting for it to pop up. I haven't seen it yet, but one of these days we'll see it. But another thing too, people forget, Scotty Bowman wasn't the only one that got his skates brought to him to skate on the ice.
There you go.
I remember tying my skates, or someone tying my skates on the bench, and I was ripping around the ice. Families are still out there. Guys are starting to go back in the locker room to party, and I'm just ripping around the ice, just like if it was a Sunday morning practice.
Just somewhat aloof to the So then we won in '08 in Pittsburgh, Game 6. What do you remember? What do you remember about that experience?
I mean, obviously I was 12 years old. I can do the mental math for that one. But I remember we went on the flight with the families, and we're on the bus, and we're sitting in the family section. And I guess the one other thing too I want to preface with that is that Game 5 was the triple OT game.
Yeah.
And that was a game where too, we're in Detroit, and we want to win the cup at home, and it's going on so long. And I just remember being at some point being like, can this game just end? I'm like,
it was your fault.
Yeah, it was my fault. Yeah. I just wanted a free trip to Pittsburgh.
Oh, there you go.
Actually, it's a lie. I was at a Mellon Arena.
Says no one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mellon Arena, not the new one.
No, exactly. I would say I wanted to go there but I was there for Game 4, so that doesn't count.
Right.
But no, that was an amazing experience, because then you're on the ice there. Not only are you on the ice, you're then, in the locker room after. I mean, the locker room literally may have been the size of this room.
Smallest ever.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier about the, the Joe Louis, walking around there like sardines. Just imagine a locker room 10 by 10 with 50 people in there.
Well, I tell the story, dog. Were you in the training room? In the training room, which was literally, it was if you open the wall here and put two of these offices together, so two of these little rooms, and you had 60 people in there. Well, it was just the team and everybody else. We had the champagne and the champagne spraying everywhere. This room's so small that when we were done singing or whatever, the champagne was up to your knees. It was just filled. Open the door and everything poured out of there. But it was hot, but it was awesome. So remembering that.
I remember that, and then I remember us leaving and heading on the bus, going back on the plane back to Detroit. And you get into Detroit, and there's just this giant party waiting at one of the plane hangars. And you're there, I don't think I got home the next morning until 7 a.m., 8 a.m. And I'm this 12-year-old kid, and I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew, Coca-Cola,
absolutely,
drinking out of the cup, and eating food till I couldn't eat anymore, and wrestling Jimmy Howard. Yeah. So there's just memories like that. I remember Pav getting up on the stairs thing, and he's there with the cup, and everyone's freaking out because they're like, oh my God, don't fall. And he's just, having a total main character moment, time of his life.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of great things, special memories like that. And I even remember too, obviously like the '09 playoff run, like, when you weren't playing, but still, you were with the team, and, I got the opportunity to kind of, hang around with you guys. And, we went to Pittsburgh for game 6 because you're up 3-2. And, I got to watch the game with you and kind of hang around. And, so there's a lot of cool things like that. And it's just like, experiences looking back, it's just like kind of like a pinch me moment. Like, you kind of forget how, all of these amazing memories that, or amazing experiences that you were able to, or I was able to be a part of. And that was the one thing that was always cool. And I think, that I always circle back to going, growing up at the Joe, at least from my little kid brain, I always felt like, like I was never, felt like out of place.
Right.
I always felt like, I was,
felt safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Felt at home, like
it really was like a home away from home.
From that to all the people, like, how special, like Al Sabatka, Uncle Al sorted all you guys, and that's just, Joe, security guards and all this stuff. Leslie, yep, big part, Winnie. Yeah, till to this day, some that aren't around anymore. How about the parades? Do you remember the parades at all?
Yeah, I remember the '08 parade. I remember being out of the back of the truck, and like we were throwing beads or some shit, and we had the whole family in the truck and just driving around, and just how crazy it was. And I remember being at the parade, or like down at when they had like you guys on the platform, and you were speaking, and the area hood there, shout out Uncle Hoods. That's another real one. The amount of time, like I'd go into the locker room and he'd just have a garbage bag of chocolates in his thing, and you just sneak over there and just grab a piece of chocolate, and Uncle Hoods. Let's go Vedvings.
Let's go Vedvings.
Yeah, but no, the parades were amazing, especially too because it's like, I remember the '08 one probably the most vividly, and you go to the Joe, and Joe's empty, and they're like, okay, we're taking a bus to Hockeytown, and you get to Hockeytown, and it's just insane the amount of people are there. And then you get on the trucks and you're driving around, and it's just seas of red and white. And that's one of those things too where it's just like, regardless of where I live, or whatever, I will always be a diehard Detroit sports fan. And a lot of it's one because like you grow up around it, and obviously like learning from you, but also too it's just because you see what it's like here when it's successful, and just how devoted fans are, and how special it is, how special it means to everyone when you do have success or win. And that's the thing too where I feel like looking back now that I'm older, back especially at the parade, and just seeing how many people were there, because it just meant so much to so many people. Like it wasn't just the fan aspect, or the players and the families, and be like, oh, this is so cool, whatever. It's like, no, it's cool because the whole entire city felt the win, felt the pride of winning another cup. And hopefully.
Well, speaking of that, here, give me your 2 cents on you hear me blare it day in, day out, hashtag Wiser Plan 1919. Tell everybody what does the Wiser Plan like mean to you? How far away? Like, because am I not correct in the fact that what Steve Yzerman has done, not only for the draft, through the draft, through getting guys on the ice, for what he's done with his draft capital, salary cap, stuff like this. Mm-hmm. It's not when, it's when. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. I just think today's NHL is so crazy because you have teams like Edmonton or Toronto that are paying their top guys so much money that you need to bring in all these bottom tier guys that have to fit the mold. So there's building on that aspect. There's also building on the side too, where you have other teams, like think of like a Dallas right now, or even like a Minnesota, where it's like they have good players, but they also kind of have this buy-in to like their identity. And so there's different aspects on that end. But I do think, with the Yzer plan, I think, there's still a few pieces missing.
Right. Absolutely.
If there's, I think you definitely trust Steve Yzerman. I mean, you look at that absolute powerhouse he built in Tampa.
There it is. He's done it already.
So
right?
it's one of those things too where it's like, yeah, it helps. You get Kucherov later, you got a Palat and Killorn and guys like that, and obviously you have Braden Point, who's a later pick, and you do all these good deals to bring in these pieces. But at the same time too, that's you're building through the draft, you're getting lucky at some point. I wouldn't say luck, but you're getting.
You need a bingo ball to bounce your way.
Yeah. Well, you also need to put the right depth pieces around too.
Absolutely.
I mean, arguably, I was thinking about this the other day. That fourth line in Tampa of Bellemare, Maroon, and Perry. Are they the best championship fourth line since the Grand Line, identity wise?
Well, Perry doesn't win cups.
No, but just that team's successful.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see.
Just thinking
different game. We can't compare.
But just
they don't have a
name.
They don't have a line name that runs throughout history.
Yeah, but just saying in the sense of the Grind Line was so successful for that time as a fourth line in a team that's extremely good. I think they
absolutely,
because they play to that identity. They kind of drive that bus. The Grind Line drove the bus for the wing.
See, and I would have said that before that it would have been the Goudreau, Barkley Goudreau,
Coleman, and Yanni Gord.
Yeah, right.
Well,
before they all
100%,
so it's keeping them together, but it's at the pay at the end. But playoff hockey is different. But the fact is, let me ask you this question: with everything you know from your history, either watching or being around or whatever, when I say, will Steve Yzerman be denied?
No, never.
Never be denied, right? And is it fair to say that next year expectations are playoffs?
Yeah,
for the Red Wings?
I would think so. I just think they took a big step this year, and there was a lot of good things. There was also a lot of things that weren't so good. But at the same time, too, when you're going through this, you're just, I feel like bringing in Lalonde and kind of establishing the culture and establishing everything, it takes time. And I think that's where it's okay, you had the first year, you got those kinks out. Now it's next year. Where do you make that step? And I think, there's good teams in front like Buffalo and Ottawa and whatnot. But, with another good offseason and maybe some lottery ball luck, there's no reason that they can't be.
We will see if Steve Yzerman really is a wizard. If he is really Merlin, he'll make those balls fall at least one or number two. All right, let me wind this down, Griff. A couple more things. What is it you miss the most about living in Michigan?
Going to Red Wings games.
Okay.
The Tigers games.
Going to the sporting events instead of having to watch them on TV. Fair enough.
Yeah.
More importantly, what is the food you miss the most? Or where do you miss taking your lovely, beautiful girlfriend Taylor to that she doesn't get to experience? Maybe the cuisine.
I mean, for myself, I gotta go, there's something about a Tim Hortons double that I just every single time I come back I have to get. So weird, I know. Little Caesars too. There's something about Little Caesars that I'll always be obsessed with. I think that
Little Caesars in Michigan as opposed to anywhere else.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, honestly, Little Caesars at the Joe is something that we have forbidden fruit that we'll never be able to get again. But there was something about the pizza at the Joe. It was just so much better.
Yeah, it was cardboard.
Yeah, exactly. And there was cardboard with cheese, and for some reason, it was just the best pizza ever. Wow. Another thing too, shout out Buddy's Pizza.
I was just gonna say, I can't believe you didn't say Buddy's Pizza. You and J. Chris Newberg
building you up.
You and J. Chris Newberg are the two buddies, and he lives out in LA too. He's a comedian.
You know what's another one? Primo's Pizza.
Primo's is great. Birmingham. That was a good.
Primo's.
That's a staple.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else you missed about living here?
I mean, I've friends and family. Yourself, and then obviously having grandma and everyone across the borders. Tough being far from. I don't know. There's definitely little things when I come back, and I'm just this is really nice, or this is my home, and that's one thing too that I'll always, this will always be my home.
Right.
Regardless of where I live, Detroit has such a big impression on myself, not only as, Griffin, but just kind of as, who I am, just because, I grew up here. And this is, Detroit means a lot to me, and as it does for you as well. So I think that's one thing, too. I always appreciate my time coming back. I don't miss the winters at all. You can get really used to 60 degrees in January and February.
I bet you.
The fact when you can leave the rink in the middle of the winter and have flip-flops on, not bad.
No, it wouldn't be. All right, we're going to wind this down, and we're going to do it with the Ask DMAC and Michael Gentry, BMG, Big Mike Gentry. He put in the Ask Griffin part. So I'm going to ask Griffin the Ask Griffin part from Big Mike Gentry, and he can ask DMAC the Mike Gentry questions as we wrap up the Chompin Puck Chronicles. So this is actually not part of the Chronicles. This is part of Chompin Puck. But don't let logistics kick you in the ass. Anyways, Griffin, first question. Favorite team outside of the Detroit Red Wings?
That's tough. I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. I like right now, especially. I like the teams, like the way the styles they play. I don't know. I've always had a soft thing for Tampa.
Yeah, you like winners. Fair enough. Favorite player of all time?
Jarome Iginla.
Who would you say your game is modeled after? And you can use not just one person, but it's a little bit of this with a little bit of that.
Oof. Gosh, that's so tough. I mean, I honestly, if Jarome Iginla is something, the 200-foot power forward, could score. That's one thing I always wanted. When I played junior and I was playing, shutdown third line, guys like, Brian Boyle was one that I always really looked up to, and just being, hard to play against, responsible defensively, killing penalties. I don't know. I mean, hey, I love Ovi too. I love to,
you like to shoot it like Ovi. Is that your favorite curve? The Ovi curve?
I do like that one. I don't know. I had the privilege of having, using a bunch of different ones.
The difference between Griffin McCarty and Darren McCarty, even though they both shoot right-handed, I love the heel curve and he loves the toe curve. Yeah. Shooters, passers, whatever like that. All right, those are the three. I'll hand it over to you. You get to do three Ask DMAC questions.
All right. What's your favorite memory of playing for the Grand Rapids Griffins? I still tell people that they were named after me.
Absolutely, you do. They were created in '96. It has to be. And when I asked you, when did you know, different things, or whether you're on the right path during the comeback season, the comeback year, first game at home there when I had the hat trick and the assist. And I think as Brad Thompson, the dog sitting over there, who was there at the time, and just to be able to, and I know that we shared like sort of the moment of like, this is really going to happen. Like, you're going to do this. You're like, to me, it was the icing on the cake that all the work I put in, and no matter what had happened before, that I was on my way. Like, and I didn't, not necessarily win the cup, but like get to where I thought I could be. Like, you got to remember me coming back, and Dog knows this, it was all about getting in the locker room. It wasn't about getting on the ice. It was, I knew that they needed me in the locker room because of the dismay that it was, and that's for another episode. But the fact is, and be able to get in the locker room, but I knew my game was at a place enough that I could chip in, limited to whatever it was, but play that role that I needed to play. So it all started, where we knew we were onto something. And I can't, all the time, for the parts of the 2 years that I played Grand Rapids, I couldn't thank everybody enough, because I loved it down there. As much as you did, not only because I got to share it with you, which was cool as hell, but also too because the people were awesome.
Yeah, no, that ditto. Grand Rapids was. I mean, I think we could.
Always is.
We could have our own show for that.
Oh, we do. Maybe that's the next
Perfect.
one we'll do when you're in town next time.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. What was your favorite looking patch you got to wear during your career?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I mean, the Stanley Cup patches are pretty.
Yeah, those are real cool. Those. Yeah, that's a given. Come on, Mike. That's a dumb question. It's those Stanley Cup patches. You know what though? The Winter Classic game in 2013, that uni with the big D on the front, soft spot in my heart.
Yeah, we didn't even get to touch on that. I remember being able to skate on that rink, and that was incredible. Last question. What was one arena you never wanted to play in during the playoffs?
The one that, like, it just, like, not that you didn't want to play in it, but it just sucks is Anaheim because the ice was always shitty.
It's too warm.
It just is shitty. You know what I mean? So it was always like there was always chips, and it was a sluggish, one of those games. And then they had a big team too, so it was just you just knew what you were up against. You always like playing in Edmonton. It was fast, fast ice, stuff like that. So it was all good. You did a good job, kid. Anyways, thanks for joining us. This was the Chompin Puck Chronicles for Griffin McCarty. Yeah, maybe we'll next episode we'll talk about some stories from GR and stuff like that, or whatever. Thank you for joining us. Thank you as always. Make sure you check out not only Woodward Sports Network, woodwardsports.com, but check out Chompin Puck. Remember, you can catch the morning show with Adam and Jeff, 8 to 10 a.m., Monday to Friday. They got Big D Energy with myself and Neil Rule. Then you got the Bottom Line with Braylon Edwards, Tom Mazaway, and Ryan Ermanni from 2 to 4. Then you got the big fellas, the heavyweights, Woodward Heavyweights, Easy and Spencer from 5 to 7. Catch this Chompin Puck every week, or wherever you YouTube, wherever you Spotify, wherever you do the deal that you do. Thank you for joining us as always, and have a great weekend.
Saturdays at 1 p.m. Make sure you're watching woodwardsports.com for our new show, Chompin Puck.
He shoots! He scores!
With four-time Stanley Cup champion Darren McCarty and Michael Gentry, Chompin Puck is taking the Detroit hockey community and giving them a voice. Pros to Joes. You'll get the best Detroit hockey coverage around. Chompin Puck. Saturdays 1 p.m. on woodwardsports.com.